that will do good service to Yemenis and will help others understand Yemen more and more. And I do agree with most of the report. But to go to the points that I would be focusing on, I think I'll start by saying that Yemen has been fortunate to have the GCC initiative that really worked well for Yemen so far. And I believe that Yemen needed that change. And the Arab Spring came at the right time, especially for Yemen and countries in the Arab region. And we have to keep in mind that change is not easy in regimes that have been in power for 20, 30, or 40 years. And even though a lot of people do argue and ask today, where is the Arab Spring heading to? I think there is no such a thing as Revolution Express. We have to be patient, and of course, sometimes the results do not satisfy us. But overall, I think the Arab Spring is one of the best things that has happened in the Arab world. Especially when you look at a country like Yemen, with a population of about 25 million and a per capita income of about $800 and a national budget of about $12.5 billion. I think the budget itself is probably does not come close to a budget of a huge or a big chain supermarket somewhere in the West. So I think it's not fair for Yemen, where it lives in an area with all those rich neighbors. I think Yemen deserves better, but again, we have to work harder in Yemen. And I'll go into the discussion. I'll be focusing on two issues. The first issue will be where we in the dialogue and where we hope to reach. And the second issue I'll be putting in there is what is needed from the international community and what role can they play. So just to go to the first point and start with the first point is, despite many of the challenges facing Yemen, the biggest of them is unity and the southern issue. Over the last 6 months of dialogue, we have agreed on federal state, we have agreed on sharing power and wealth. We did agree altogether in there that there is a weakness of the state, and we did agree that there is a mistrust right now between different factions in Yemen. And the mistrust is one of the biggest challenges that we have to get back. And we did agree that in order to move forward, we need an implementation period to tackle many of the issues or many of the outcome results of the dialogue. So how do we build that trust? How do we ensure that what happened in the past will not happen or repeat itself again? This is one of the things that we have to convince each other that we will not fall back into the same mistakes. As we are approaching right now the final stage of the dialogue, probably hopefully within the next 10 days, that we have extended another week in order to finalize things. I look at the reports and the report that came out of Chatham House. And when we look at the report, when you see that an elite or a group of 10 families and a few businessmen and others that were connected to the former president control probably around 80%, I think this is really unacceptable to anybody. So what do we do about all this? I mean, we have no other option right now in Yemen. Either we went for fighting, and I think fighting is not going to work in Yemen. And again, we were fortunate to have the GCC initiative and the international community behind it, whether it was the UN, the US, the UK, EU, and other countries, Russia and China. And it's very rare to have all these countries behind one issue or one country. And I think Yemenis should be grateful, and we should make good use of this. And the amazing thing is that today, when you sit down in the dialogue, and you would see in the dialogue people that were connected to the previous regime that depleted Yemen of its wealth are sitting across from the table from us. And it shows how Yemenis are patient and determined to move forward. And we don't want to have any score settling or anything, but rather move forward and try to build Yemen again. As for me personally, we're in the Southern Committee, and we have come a long way from where we started about 6 months ago. And to be fair, the Southern Hirak movement that is with us here in the dialogue have achieved more than any other group since 1990, and have worked hard and raised the ceiling, not only for the South, but also for the North to reach a limit where there is no return. But determination of a civil society, of democracy, and moving forward on building serious institutions in Yemen. How can we build on what we have reached? I think what we are right now, we've already agreed on the federal state, the regions. Hopefully within the next 2 to 3 days, we will agree how many regions will be in Yemen. Sharing of power, we have already quite a good understanding, and it will come out in the findings probably within the next few days. And how do we make sure that all this can be achieved? I think the biggest challenge for all of us is that the will of the people. The will of the people of Yemen are serious about moving forward. The leadership and those that are in the dialogue, as well as the political parties, NGOs, youth, and women, everyone has to believe in this change, and everybody so far believes in this change, regardless that we have so many problems or we have spoilers in the way. But in the end, I think Yemen will prevail and move forward. And I think one of the biggest challenges today is how do we start convincing people that institutions should replace the loyalty to individuals or the loyalty to tribes or even to political parties, and start believing that these institutions can preserve and maintain future Yemen. This is why when we started talking about the implementation period, and I think and many of us agree that a 5-year implementation period is probably enough, and some still think that it's not enough, but I think if we work hard at the 5 years, we will reach where we are. The 5-year will give us a chance to build the new federal state of Yemen. How do we get there? We need to think what mechanism or what steps do we need to follow in order to reach that. Personally, and that's my personal view, and I've already shared this at the dialogue here, is that we need to form a general committee that is out of the national dialogue. We would have members of the general committee, probably 150 to 200 members. This general committee can overtake the responsibility of the parliament. Parliament in Yemen has been there for over 11 years. I think it's one of the oldest parliaments in the world. And seriously, nobody trusts this parliament. And since there is more trust on the dialogue than the parliament, I think the dialogue can do a better job in helping move forward this implementation period. The other thing is that we need to form a government immediately after finishing the national dialogue. We have to start a new start. So those two bodies, the committee and the government, can oversee the implementation of the outcome of the dialogue and can work on approving the new constitution and organize the referendum for the constitution. We're talking about a period of about 4 to 5 to 6 months maximum. And people need to see new institutions rather than rely on the old institutions that have not delivered anything. This will easily pave the road for a presidential election to take place in the early or in the first quarter of 2014, as was stated in the GCC initiative, and it will comply with the GCC initiative. Many would argue, why can't we have parliamentary election at the same time? It's not easy to have a parliamentary election, and I do agree with your report that led to probably we would have some sort of kind of scenarios that will result. And I surely do agree that we will have unrest. And what's more frustrating to everybody is that how can we have an election that will only produce those that were the problem for what we have reached in Yemen? So I think we need more time for other groups, whether new political parties, NGOs, women, youth, to organize themselves and to level the field for everybody to have a fair share at these elections. How can we do that? We need probably another 2 to 3 years until we can level this. If you ask me personally, I would rather have this period in order to have a proper election. We don't want to have election, then next day we will start having fighting because nobody will comply with the results. Because I don't think the outcome would be fair to anybody, especially right now. And we gradually have to move in order to change the political map in Yemen. The political map in Yemen has been the same for over 25, 30 years. But with the new political parties and the women and NGOs and everybody, we have to change this political map. We dismantle many of the monopoly that has been controlling whether the political life or the economy and what have you. So Yemen needs a serious fresh start. These steps have to be accompanied as well, especially when we say an implementation period. These steps have to be accompanied by improvement of the standard of living of people, raising the hope of people that this change is for the better of Yemen and better of their life, of their families. Otherwise, if we do not start delivering, and I sadly say the government in the last 2 years has not done a good job. And if we do not start delivering right now, people will not even wait for 4 or 5 years. They will not even wait for 1 year. That's why it's very urgent that we should start implementing and delivering to the people so that they can have that faith and hope in the implementation period. When you come to the second point, which is the role of the international community, what do we need from the international community? I think we need serious help and we need a lot of help. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that how do we build institutions that can stabilize Yemen and break up this monopoly of corruption and interest group, whether in the civilian side or in the military side. That's where we need real help from the international community. We need help in capacity building, and above all, we need their commitment to continue their support in the political process that they have started and they have done a good job. And I do agree that Chatham House and other think tanks have diagnosed many of the problems that Yemen is facing, whether it's the families that are controlling or sadly when you have for each dollar that comes into Yemen about $2.70 leave Yemen and many other issues. Today what we need from the international community is help and solutions. Solutions from the Western capitals and how to gain back Yemen from those hands that have depleted Yemen. We believe that forgiveness and reconciliation is the key for stability, but it does not mean business as usual for those that have done damage to Yemen in the past and have made huge wealth out of the people that are suffering seriously today. So I'll just have another minute or so. I don't want to go beyond the time.
Okay, 1 more minute.
2 minutes, please. Yeah. I think these
good negotiation.
Sure. I think these individuals and these groups must face serious sanctions and cannot go on while using their wealth and destabilizing the country and continue to be spoiled. I think they have done damage enough, and Yemenis have been patient enough with the reconciliation and forgiveness, but I don't think they should take advantage of that. And we need the help in trying to get back some of this wealth. I know it's very difficult to get it, but at least if we can, with the help of some of the Western capitals. Finally, we all need to see a success story that can, especially in an area of disappointment. And I think Yemen can be that success story for everybody, whether for Yemen or for the international community. We want to be partners in fighting hunger, radicalism, poverty, and corruption. And we do appreciate the aid that is given, but nations cannot flourish only on aid. We need to be partners in investment and development. That would ensure us all security and stability. And I do apologize for extending my time. I think I'm done out here. I'll stop in here, and I do apologize for extending. And thank you again very much for listening.
It is my great pleasure to be here today with you. I second what Mohammed Abu Al-Hum said about the report. I think that the report has addressed a lot of touched upon a lot of the issues that we have internally in Yemen. It has well described it, and I hope that our political actors in Yemen in the national dialogue are reading or will get a copy of the report to read it and to take into consideration some of the recommendations that have been put forward. It's no surprise to everybody here that Yemen has, for a long time, the Yemeni political landscape has been hijacked by a few elites. Those elites either has worked during decades to solidify their positions or to try to fight for the positions of the others in that political landscape. And unfortunately, those elites did not take us in Yemen anywhere. We got from one situation, one economic situation to a worse. The economy in Yemen has been degrading since the 1990s, it's not getting any better, especially with Peter's expectations. But the situation was forced to change by different new political actors. A political settlement was forced upon those elites. There was a forced power transfer. A government of coalition was also forced on them. Military restructuring was forced on them. All of these things happened by a number of new political players. Some of which were the youth who led the protests in the change squares. Some are the women, the brave women who shared this responsibility of changing the regime and changing the situation in Yemen. Some are the civil society movements that have been fighting for years for the rights of everybody in Yemen and for the development of the country. There was also the repressed from the south and from the north who came all together with other groups of society into the change squares, and they have forced this change. What made this a success was that everybody at one point of time forgot about their political orientation, and they focused on a vision that was clear for everybody, which was change, and that change was represented, at least for a while, for changing. It was a change of regime, which translated into a change of few individuals, but it was focused. People knew exactly what they wanted to work on. The challenge that we have right now is, would these new political players continue to have influence and continue to change the situation in Yemen, or did they just get a moment and everything just passed by? I think there are factors that we have to identify to be able to assess this question, and one is the clarity of a vision. Do those new political actors have a clarity of vision of what do they want the next phase to be? Do they have strong organizational skills so that they can coordinate their efforts, they can build coalitions, alliances? Do they have access to finances that can help them sustain their pressure? And do they recognize the opportunities that are being created by the GCC initiative and its implementation mechanism, by the National Dialogue Conference outcomes? And I speak here more specifically about the federal state where governance is decentralized, and I speak about the recognition of the women's quota and youth quota and taking advantage of it. And I'll speak quickly about some of these political players and how they have performed. So we have the youth, for example. The youth have, at the beginning of the events, the revolution in 2011, they were able to forget their divisions. They were able to identify a vision that unified them. They were able to coordinate among themselves. And that's what gave them that kind of strength. Unfortunately, as the GCC initiative took the lead in the scene in Yemen, and as we went through the national dialogue, unfortunately, the youth started to go back to their political orientations, to their political groupings, and that has created these divisions among themselves, and there wasn't as clear a vision as it used to be. And the performance in the national dialogue, at least from my assessment, was less than less than what was expected. They could not work as a block that could help them. Now, going into the future, I think that this is going to continue to be the same, especially because unless they start to reconsider how they are working together. And I don't think that this is going to happen because the quotas are an incentive for the political parties to try to push their young people into taking more leadership positions, or at least decision-making decisions, which then creates a division between the youth group as a whole, because it creates different incentives for different people. So the situation, as I mentioned, in Yemen, there are new political players. They have an opportunity to influence the situation in Yemen, but they need, especially the groups that are youth and women, they need the assistance of their international friends to help them to think as a group and to identify beyond their political positions so that they continue to exert that kind of influence on the situation in Yemen. And unless this has happened, then soon enough they will just be dissolved into the other grouper political factions that exist already in Yemen, and they will not have as much influence. And I end here.
I'll speak about two issues, economical issues and political issues. Why should I start with economical issues? Because I am coming from private sector, from a family business. And I've gone through your report. I find what's written in the report, the recommendations, I think explains a lot of what's happening in Yemen, and recommendations I think are great. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on the economical issues in Yemen. Why did we have revolution in Yemen? We had revolution in Yemen because people are fed up. Poverty, unemployment, corruptions, you name it. People went to the street and started marching and demonstrating. I will talk about the private sector, coming up from a private sector. I like the word that you have put in your reports, the elites. And you mentioned 10 elites. And I would like to clarify that issue on that reports where it says, thank you very much for saying a clean company in Taiz. And that's supposed to be our group. To do a business in Yemen in the past, before the revolution, I think was a headache. Why should a Yemeni businessman invest in Yemen if you can have better opportunities somewhere else? You have incentives, you have lands, you have services. I can go and invest in Saudi Arabia, I can go and invest in UAE, I can go to Egypt in the past, not now. Huh? Anywhere in Europe, I can go to Southeast Asia. Our group has done that. But we thought that we had an obligation as a family business to do our business in Yemen. How can you invest in Yemen if you have to buy your own land? You have to secure the land. You have to have your own security. You have to have your own electricity. You have to produce your own water. You have to do all this. You have to train people. You have to give them all the benefits. And at the end of the day, you have to pay taxes to the government. So the government is only collecting taxes from you, and they are not giving you anything. In Yemen, until the revolution started, we had a lot of laws, good laws in Yemen. Our parliament was always busy in producing laws, issuing laws, but the problem, they are not being implemented. We have a very good investment law, but when it comes to practice and trying to implement or to invest in a company or in a factory in Yemen, believe it, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, it became really a big problem. Government people wanted, or officials, or the new elites, and I would like to say the new elites, in starting from 85, late 80s forward, we started to have a new business people coming into Yemen. People who are coming from the ex-government, or coming from sheikhs, or coming from tribes, or coming from political parties, who are trying to compete with the real business people. They have an advantages. They are in the government, they are controlling army, they are controlling power, they have power, and they try to compete with you. If you look into Yemen, look who is controlling construction, telecommunications, banking, trading, it's the new business people. Who's doing industrial work? None of them is doing it. It's only the real business Yemeni who are doing those industrial work where you are employing people, you have to distribute your product all over the country. This is real business that we have in Yemen. That was in the past. The only solution for Yemen, if we really want to attract, I mean, you Europeans, Americans are causing us a problem as Yemenis or as Arabs to invest in our countries. We have a lot of opportunities outside Yemen or outside the Arab countries. We have no security. Who's going to invest in Yemen in the next 5 years? I'm talking to you now as a governor, as a businessman, used to be a businessman. Why should I invest in Yemen if I cannot, if my truck loading a product from a factory going to Hadramaut will be hijacked or taking the products will be taken on the way? And you imagine you're driving from Taiz all the way to Aden and then going all the way to Al-Mahra or Hadramaut. You have no chance. If you take it by ship, then you have Somali on the sea. If you, and that's really a problem. So Yemeni business or foreign investment in Yemen was a problem, and it's going to be a problem unless we have security first. We have no problem in Yemen in putting your money, getting your money out of Yemen, whether it's profits or any transfer of money. We are far better than any other countries we have around us, especially in Africa. Or we have an advantage as Yemeni. Africa is next to us. It's a big market. It's a big market. But we want to have an infrastructure. We want to have laws that are implemented for a private sector. The only solution to Yemen is to have an employment level reduced by a big margin. And that will not come through employing people in government. Unfortunately, our government in the last 3 years, they have employed a lot of people who graduated from universities 10 years ago in the government, and they are in offices doing nothing. You find people are fighting to get a chair to sit in an office. So what do? They cause problems, they corrupt, they try to make problems, they go and demonstrate in the streets. Government is not the solution to solve the problem of unemployment. It's the private sector, small, medium, are the main important sector in that field. So what do we need? We need your support as international community. We have to have the ground ready for us as a private sector. When I talk about private sector, I'm not talking about big private sector. Private sector, as a big ones, they can manage their way through. I'm talking the majority of people, young people, women, and men who are trying to find jobs, who are trying to establish their own small businesses. They cannot get through. They cannot get through. Our government, when they want to establish law and they want to implement law, they implement it on the small and medium businesses. And that's why you have a lot of people in the streets. People are committing crimes. People are getting crazy, running the street. I mean, it's all this kind of problems. So I think for us, economy, you will not solve the problems of Yemen if you fight Al-Qaeda. You will solve the problem of Yemen if you establish security. And that will come to my second page, is having security. I was appointed as a governor. For some of those people who are here, I was not aware that I'm going to be a governor of Taiz. I was in Cairo, and then somebody called me, a friend called me, he said, congratulations, we have a new governor of Taiz. And I said, who? He said, you. So I was a CFO of a group. I moved from a business, family-oriented, to a public-oriented sector. Yes, I was elected as a local council from 2001 until I was appointed as a governor. And I was the head of the Finance and Planning Committee in my governorate, but I was working part-time. And I was doing a lot. I thought I knew a lot of things about my city or my governorate. But when I became a governor, I think I came in the wrong time. I found that, yeah, a lot of things have changed in Yemen. A lot of things have changed in Taiz. These Taizi people that I know, well, yes, they are not the people that I thought I know. I came at the time with a business back-oriented person. I thought I will be able to, whatever I was doing in the private sector, I could do it in the public work. And I thought with the 12 or 11 years experience I was having in the local council, being in the governorate building there, I know everybody in the governorate, working in the government. I thought I can do a lot. I can change people very fast. And I had the laws with me, and I said to the president, yes, I'll take the post. Constitution comes first, local council law comes second. So that means I have power over all the people that works in Taiz. I don't want any interference from ministers or from cabinet. And the things that are between me, that governs the relation between me and them, is the local council law, which is giving me the authority to appoint or dismiss anybody who's working or not working well or doing well in the government. And then I started having a war inside. I mean, especially during, I've been now as a governor for 1 year and a half. Unfortunately for Yemen, people who are, whether they are in political parties or in some of the NGOs or ministers or the cabinet, they care a lot, and they care a lot about their parties, about themselves, and they care less about the people. I was, in the last 2 weeks ago, I was invited to the cabinet meeting to discuss, I mean, Taiz, I asked the governor, president, I said, Sana'a is the political capital of Yemen. Aden is the economical capital of Yemen. What can Taiz be? And he said, you choose. And I said, okay, let it be the cultural capital of Yemen, because we have an old history. Makkah port is there. I can do a lot of things. And we became the cultural capital of Yemen. And I went to the cabinet to discuss with them, and it was like I'm talking a language, I was coming from a different planet. The people who are sitting, and I think that's one of the disadvantages, or of the things that was not really done well with the GCC agreement. I think the selection of having political parties governing Yemen. Can you imagine yourself sitting in a table like this where you have 30, I don't know, 28 or 30 ministers? This is socialist, this is GBC, and this is Salah, and this is Nasri, and this is I don't know, and everybody is fighting for himself or for his political party. Nobody gives a damn about what's happening in Yemen. I think within the last 2 years, if our ministers or our government did a few things, water problems, electricity problem, security problems, it could have been done. Why should we wait until our national dialogue finishes? When you ask a minister, you say, okay, we wait until the national dialogue finishes. I'm afraid of what's going to be happening after the national dialogue. So I think in terms of law, I had a meeting with Gamal Umar. He asked me 2 questions. He said, what do you think about federalism? And I said to him, I believe in federalism. I believe in decentralization. But I believe that will not work unless 2 things are there. Central government is committed to have federalism or to implement federalism and to give authorities to the federal states. Second thing is international committees should be committed and supervise that transition period to make sure that federalism will go. Otherwise, it's going to be more corruption, it's going to be more security problems. Not all the federal states can manage. Yes, maybe Taiz can manage, Aden can manage, Hadramaut can manage, but some other states, why Saada is doing better in terms of security compared to Aden or to Hudaydah or to Taiz? Because they are controlling it. They are controlling it. They are decentralized. The central government is not in Saada. They are away from it. So I think that's really the things. If we really want
if you could
Yemen,
start wrapping up, please.
all right. If we really want Yemen to succeed or to become a success story, we have to have power sharing. We have to have transparency. We have to fight corruption, women rights, youth rights, and at the end of the day, I think the only solution for us is to have federalism, but to be controlled and supervised by international committees and commitment from the central states. Thank you very much.
Hi. So first, I want to thank everyone here for coming here to talk about something other than terrorism. This is very refreshing, and I'm excited to talk about something else. It's hard to follow these groups of people because they spoke so wonderfully about several topics. The only thing I would have to say about the economy is that I feel that the international community could have helped more in terms of use the previous transitional period to kind of confiscate and regulate weapons in Yemen, which makes it, that didn't happen, which makes the next transitional period that's going to come up a lot harder. I also sympathize with Mr. Hayel very much because Ambassador Marriott, when I was in Yemen, asked me, why don't the youth participate in the Yemeni government? And that's exactly why the youth who actually have qualifications to do actual work in Yemen would choose to work outside of the government. So until that's fixed, I think a lot of the qualified youth would choose to stay away from that, which is very unfortunate. Now I'm going to shift back to what I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about three main things. The first is the possible extension for President Hadi for the next 4 years. They say it could be 5 years, and what to expect and what we should have in mind and what we should ask about the next transitional period. And then I would like to discuss the role of the international community, and I would like to talk about the role of women and the youth. So in Yemen right now, they're talking about an extension that's going to be 4 years long, where President Hadi will continue to be the president. Of course, they're going to do so through elections. The only reason they're doing that is because of something called the sequencing strategy to democracy, in that they want to have stabilization, where everything is kind of managed before you can actually have competitive elections. So that sounds logical, you know, that you want to stabilize the country, you want to have some sort of rule of law before a president, you know, before you can have competitive elections and parties can compete. The problem I have with that is that there are several things that arise. First of all, I'm worried about, is the international community and are Yemenis creating another autocrat that could stay longer than the 4 years? The only reason I'm saying this is because the military restructuring in Yemen has not been as good as it should be. What happened is they removed some powers, but then President Hadi kind of inserted his own new political powers. So even if President Hadi's removed, we still have his, I guess, his military group, for the lack of a better word. So another problem that we have is that we're rushing into elections again. So we're rushing into elections because we just want to get past this and extend the period that we've already had, because the national dialogue is only going to produce a document. There are no realities happening on the ground, so we're extending that. The problem with Yemen is that right now we have so many identities and so many divisions, so it's harder to contain. We don't have any historical experience with political pluralism. And we have very, very low levels of economic development. All of these things need to be addressed and cannot be addressed properly without the process of democratization. So as a person who's living outside of Yemen but continuously goes back in, I'm very worried about extending the transitional period for that long under the same leadership, especially since as Mr. Abu Luhum pointed out, they want to have the same group of people who are in the national dialogue become members of the parliament. I feel like we're creating a new elite. I don't know if after the 4 years we're going to have the same group over and over again for the next 33 years. It also limits opportunities for other people to come and participate in government. So that's kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about. So the second thing I want to talk about is the role of the international community in Yemen. I feel like Yemen right now has an international extravaganza in the sense that there is international NGOs, transnational government organizations, aid groups, governments are participating. Some people would say their role is limited and is only there to support Yemen's transition, and other people can say no, because we're going through a crisis, their role is a lot more than that. I'm torn because I see that the role of the international community is very influential when it comes to the national dialogue, but nothing that you see in the national dialogue is actually being translated outside of the national dialogue. So that's the role of the international community for the time being. Of course, they have other development projects outside. Another thing that the international community should do is look at development in Yemen. Instead of it being long-term development like they usually do it, it needs to be a reconstruction, short-term development where the aid goes to areas that are most in need of it, meaning a lot of the aid needs to go to the south, a lot of the aid needs to go to Sada, a lot of aid needs to go to the areas where we might have IDPs. So, and sorry, another critique I have is that I feel like the international community is treating Yemen almost like an experiment at the time being. Like, I'm not really sure what they're doing with the national dialogue, how we're gonna achieve democracy. And I'm worried as a Yemeni that this could be an experiment that could really fail, and the only people that would suffer from it would be Yemenis, and then we can hold elections, and that would be a great exit strategy for the entire international community. So that's a fear that I have. I want to talk about the role of women. So in the national dialogue, the women are pushing for a 30% quota, and as Ala said, the women have been working very hard for it. However, I am very skeptical that we're going to have a 30% quota just because the women worked very hard for it. Women right now are about 29% of the national dialogue. The youth are about 20%. That's like 50%. So if they ally with each other, they're going to be 50%. So to get a thing passed in the national dialogue, you need to have a 90% consensus or above. Otherwise, it goes to the consensus committee and so on. So there was a discussion about women having 30% quota in the legislative branch of the government. As of yesterday, I heard that women are going to have a 30% quota in all three branches of the government. But I don't feel that it is the case because that's what the Yemenis want to have, or the people in the national dialogue want to have, but I feel it's because President Hadi endorsed it publicly in a Yemen Times article. He wrote his first op-ed in English, and he talked about the role of the women and the youth, and I feel that the 30% quota is going to be a product of the national dialogue, but not because we believe in women's rights to have the 30% quota, but because it's a check mark where you can kind of check and be like, oh, look, we got democracy here. Yemen just did something very great for women. Of course, if the 30% quota is passed, that's great. I would like that to happen. I want women to take advantage of it, but I'm worried about, are we setting women up to fail? What happens if a political party that does not believe in the rights for women, wins the election, they have 30% of their party members as women? Will these women work for other women, or would they just follow along party lines? So that's what I think about women's participation for now. I'm talking as a woman. I'm also going to talk as a youth. If I wasn't so fortunate with my life, I would be a double minority right now. I would be in Yemen, I would be a woman, I would be a youth, and I would not do anything with my life because I would be probably sick with 3 children, and they'll all be malnourished. And these are all problems that we need to think about because women don't have access to healthcare, they don't have access to education, they don't have, they're actually out of IDPs. I think women and children are the majority of IDPs. Would the 30% quota solve these problems that need to be solved? Is the quota a guarantee that women are going to get what they want? When it comes to the subject of the youth, I feel like the youth are the worst category to be in because everybody who's in the youth category knows that it's temporary. You're just a youth for a certain period of time and then you move on. So rather than trying to solidify yourself as a youth, you pretty much become a realist, because that's what Yemenis are. We're realists. We look forward to the future. So what we do is we plan to be in political parties, or we plan to have a job here or there. The biggest challenge to the youth who are educated is restriction of movement. Coming to the UK, I personally had a problem getting a visa on time to come here. I can't imagine how hard it is for someone who's from a village in Yemen who would like to go to Saudi Arabia, who would like to go to any other Gulf country to go and work. If you continue to restrict their movements, if they're constantly treated as, terrorists, I assume, until, I don't know, they just won't be able to go and work or do anything. Another problem is that the current system that we have in Yemen is pretty much based on nepotism. And that hasn't changed, and it will probably continue to be that way for a little bit. So if you're not fortunate enough to be from a good background or to have really, really good education or to have connections to someone else, then odds are, as a youth, you're kind of screwed unless you join a political party. I would probably recommend joining GPC or Islah and so on, because that's where the future is. So these are a lot of the challenges that are there. I think that what could help is the role of CSOs, and maybe Mr. Al-Qasim can talk about that later, because they can function as a watchdog, and it's the only grassroots kind of, it could be, you know, the Yemenis monitoring Yemenis on their progress rather than having outsiders look at the progress that Yemen is doing. I feel like I touched on all points, and I hope you guys have questions, so I'm gonna cut my talk here and see if you have any other questions.